So in the early events, we actually enjoy the quite interesting ones that the little kids is joining hands with the scientists to work alongside the red carpet. 2019 Science Night is one of the major events in the year 2019. So the Science Week will be started at May 19th to May 26th. Across the country, there is going to be 21,000 events upheld to celebrate the science literacy. So here we can see that this schematics is going to give us a demonstration of tonight's events. So this is actually within the Chinese Academy of Science, which actually gives us a tonight we are going to see the National Conservatory and also the China's Microbiological Association. But today, the event is actually being upheld by the Chinese Academy of Science, the Zoological Association. So we like to invite Curator Qiao, who is also the curator of National Zoological Museum. Let me ask you a few questions about tonight's events. You have prepared for a long time. Can you give us a few highlights? We are going to have 24 events tonight. We have the immersive experience, book readings, and all kinds of literatures. And I invited all the friends to really care about the several events, including the many different live animals and also the samples we have collected. And we also invite the kids to actually have a hands-on experience of all the animals. We have several different parties for the kids to do. So we also have the demonstrations and shows to actually entertain and inform the kids. I believe that with our curator's introduction, we are much looking forward to these events. So, which events can we really have an immersive experience on that? Let's follow my sites to check about these events. There are so many different events happening around 6:30. Today there are over 3,000 people, over 1,000 families participating into these events. So here we have some of the psychological events to let the kids to understand their psychological movements. So here, this scientific project is about milk firework. So what does it mean? Let's have a look. So can you tell us about this event? This is an experiment about milk rainbow. So we are actually using the surface activizer. So by combining the milk and also the color additives together, because the color additive is less dense than milk, so they will be floating on top of the milk. So can you show us what is the feature about that? Let me give you a demonstration. You can see that the kids are crowded here with their curious eyes. So we can just pour some of the milk with the color additives. And if you are using this is actually the extensive powers of the water. So we are actually lowering down the surface power of the water, and for the color additive, they are actually dragging out these force. So this is a quite magic moment for all the kids. The moments we actually put the stop sticks inside, all the kids actually followed, and this is a quite interactive event. We believe that there are not only projects from the National Zoological Museum, there are also different projects provided by the Nanoscience Museum and also the Psychological Science, CAS. So Many people play the small game of connecting dots. So let's have a look at how the kids can actually play the game together. So let's check how the kids are doing the interactions between each other. So I actually pointed the start for the kids. 3, 2, 1. There will be different facial expressions on the screen, and the kids need to select different facial expressions. So you might think that recognizing the facial expression for the human minds might be very easy for you, but for the angry, fear, or painful, all these facial expressions is not that different with each other. So, but this actually requires the kids to understand each other's emotions. So we actually make a quite small science literacy applications together based on our research. So this will let the kids understand what does psychology, the science is meaning for them. And I think this is better for them to apply the psychological education with their day-to-day life. Can you give us more applicational example? For example, we have some of the light testing equipments and also the anti-terrorism police bureaus. They actually controlled about these micro facial expressions, and I think this is also closely to our day-to-day life. Thank you very much, because there are so many kids here. All the kids are lining up for playing this application. So we can see that on this square there are several hundreds and thousands of kids involve themselves in these scientific events. So we need to let the cameraman to have a look on another major project. So we'd like to invite Curator Qiao to give us a brief introduction of National Zoological Museum. The National Zoological Museum, if we track back our history, it actually goes back to around 200 years ago in the 1980s. So in the year 2009, the museum was officially opened to the public. This is actually the largest demonstration museum in China about the zoological discoveries. So the total exhibition area covers 880 meters. These are the true living animals samples. This is actually a group of polar bear. These are the brown bears. We actually mimic their real living environment, brown bears and polar bear. So I think that we are about to enter into the exhibition house for birds. So because in all kinds of the vibrates, birds are actually the youngest. The reason we have this exhibition area is that we want to show the diversity. Special exhibition hall is about the birds. I think the birds are closely related to our lives. I talked to you about the diversities about the birds, and I believe that in our country, the total numbers of birds is accounted for 15% of the global populations, and in China there are 1,300 kinds of birds, and these are some of the rare birds which was featured about the bald eagles and all kinds of other eagles dwelling in China. So for example, this kind of grassland eagles, where does they live? It generally lives and flies in the grassland. They are actually at the top of the food chain, and they were catching all these mice which were raining in the grassland. So they are actually at the top of the food chain. So for another part, I want to introduce you. These are some of the watery birds. For example, the small swan, and also these are the watery birds. These are also quite rare birds. Can you give us an example that for these rare species? So can you give us a number about this endangered animal? I think endangered and rare are two different concepts. For this endangered animal, it means that they are actually about to extinct. But for the rare animal, it means that we need to set up special natural reserves to protect the lives of all kinds of birds. So for all these birds, if we protect the local ecological system, we protect the very environment for the birds. These watery birds has three different features: long legs, long necks, and also long body, and these are quite important features for the birds. So we call it white skin. White skin eagles. So they are actually ibis. They are actually eating the planktons floating around the water. So many kids, together with their family, which were paying a side tour tonight. So we are actually equipped with professional instructors and to educate and provide all kinds of information. Here is actually another different categories of birds. Those birds who are walking on the ground or who can climb the trees. So with all kinds of birds, we want to show the kids a diversity of the bird species in China. These are the 4 different birds. And in our museums, among the 1,300 species of the birds, we actually demonstrated over a half of these species. And I think the beauty of birds is not only about its furs, it's also about its different categories, their interactions, and their relations with the ecological environment. With more and more kids understand the different categories of birds, and more kids will be raised up to more awareness to protect the birds. So we can say that these birds are more like the potteries based on the different size of their body and based on their different. So I think that the bulk of the birds is quite different. Some of them has a curved bulk, some of them has a downward bulk. So I think these features is servicing. Why does this difference actually happens? It's because their eating habits. For example, some of the birds are trying to dig out some of the foods in the beaches. So I think their the shape of the birds is closely related to their eating habits. This is also being proved by Darwin in his Origins of Species. Today, I'm also quite curious that the National Zoological Museum, what are the relations between the research of birds and the research of human beings? Very closely related. A few years ago, we have the name of the bird flu, which were quite infectious among the population. And the bird flu was originally because of the bird migrants. So let's check about these schematics. With the migrant birds, the birds fly to every corner of the world. So these dotted lines are actually indicating the migrating track for the birds. During their migration, they need to flying down and also take a break. But at that time, they actually have an interaction with the local environment. So I think the bird itself is actually one important dweller of the earth. The research of And protection and preservation of bird species is also the preservation and protection of human species. So we are actually demonstrating the migrant birds, their flying track. These birds are being concentrated in Qinghai Lake in China. So after finishing all the birds, after finishing the first part of the exhibitions, we are about to climbing upstairs. With the night dwell, we can see the atmosphere is becoming more active about science. So there are so many different birds who devoted themselves to the scientific endeavor. So Tutor Qiao give us a small stories about why does these kind of birds devote themselves to the experiment. These groups of the birds is actually our scientific best companions. These parrots is one major part of our scientific research. We find that all the beautiful parrots, male parrots, they are more attractive to the females. But we actually trained some of the ugly parrots to be able to get some of the foods. And in the second selections, all the female parrots actually choose these ugly parrots who are capable of getting the foods. So this is actually changing the scientific impressions. This is actually events which were being prepared for the tonight's events. So we are taking a break. They are actually taking a break here, and I think a while later we will welcome several kids here. So let me give you an interview about what's the steps of making up a bird nest. First, you need to make up a bird's egg. So today we are actually using the shallow blue eggs, and I think this color is actually hidden the eggs inside the nest. So we are actually using the traditional plantation, all kinds of the grass, to make this bird nest. And I believe that with several different layers of the bird's nest, it's going to keep the worms inside. And for many different watery birds, they are going to choose the water or seaweeds to be a part of their home. And for many different city-dwelling birds, they are going to select several tree leaves or different parts of the even the paper in the city to help them to nest their to build up a nest. So I think all the kids need to be facilitated with the abilities to make up with the bird's nest. So it's very difficult for the humankind to make up this bird's nest. But you can imagine how hard it would be for the birds to actually building up their own nest, because it will take them 2 to 3 months to finish one bird's nest. We see a few kids coming. Welcome, and we are heading to our next stop. These science literacy events is actually helping the young kids to understand the difficulties and struggles when the birds are making up their nests. Are there any other events in the museum? We actually have 2 different events in this museum. One is the insects workshop. It's actually education, book reading sessions, and also teaching and learning sessions for the kids to understand how do they make samples of the insects. The second event is about, so let's check about how does the specimen is being made. So based on different categories and methodologies, so we have different way of making the specimens. So this is actually the most difficult part. So for most of our research, we are actually focusing on the specimens of the invertebrates. This is actually based on the animal's daily life. We actually unskin the animals and actually make the skins on top of this structure and to make up these specimens. So here we are seeing one important exhibition hall, the endangered animal in China. So for example, in this exhibition hall, it is a quite rare exhibitions. So what is the feature behind it? So I think for the Qinling area, Qinling Mountain is actually the separation lines for the northern part of China and the southern part of China. And there are 4 different tribes in Qinling. One part is about one animal is the taken. And if you look at the taken, you will find its face looks like a sheep, while its total structure, while its body it looks like a ox. And another important endangered animal is the crested ibis. It's only existed in Shanxi Province, Yang County. Currently, we have over 2,000 crested ibis. We have 3 important golden mountain, especially the Sichuan golden mountain, which is quite rare because it also has its blue furs. The body has a quite colorful expression. Another quite rare treasure in our country is the great panda. This is a full demonstration of the Qinling Mountain. So with all the 4 trials in the Qinling Mountains, it means that we have a quite good preservation of the natural environment in Qinling. So we protected all the 4 rare animals in Qinling, and that is how we also protect the ecological environment of Qinling Mountain, because this is actually an ecological system. These are actually the demonstration areas for the monkeys. There are several different famous monkeys, which is the white-head monkey and also the black-headed mountain. For the white-headed mountain, you could only find them in the Chongzuo area in Guangxi province. There are only several hundreds of them. Quite poor thing. It needs several generations of the human beings to protect their lives. If we take a few steps forward, these are fox and wolves. These are the puma, black puma. Although it looks like 2 different animals in the world, but actually the black pumas is another part of puma. These are the tigers. There are several few tigers. The northeast tiger, Bangladesh tiger, southern tigers in China. Can you give us an introduction about what is the difference between the 3 different tigers? I think for the southern China tiger, it's actually the smallest among these 3. The biggest. And this is also the only category belongs to the China. For the northeast tiger, it's been widely distributed in the northern part of China, but the Bangladesh tiger is actually the widely distributed in the Yunnan, India, and Bangladesh areas. We see there are several different families visiting this National Zoological Museum, several quite interesting events, because today they are going to experience small events which was named the best detective in the museum. So let me give you an interview. So Can you give me an introduction of the card you are holding? These are some of the pamphlets which was being sent to me. Today I feel really happy and I'm really glad that I could learn something. This is not the importance. This is not I don't think he's participating in the best detective in the museum nights. So here is also a rare animal, endangered animal. This is the Yangtze River white elephant. It's distinct functionally in the natural environment. This is the cowfish, which is a cousin of the white elephant, white dolphin. So the last dolphin in China is named Qi, and it died 10 years ago in the Chinese Academy of Science, Zoological Research. So here we have a huge alarm, which was sending signals to all the kids. Downward, we have all kinds of marks, reminding us the year of a certain species extinct on the Earth. So after checking so many different spots, we are heading for our next step. The curtains of this night is pulling down, and I believe that it's the time for us to have a real taste of the science. Apart from all these events in our museum, do we have any science reading or lecture? So we have 2 lectures tonight. One lecture is actually at the Zoological Association. It's about the behavior of birds. Another lecture is about the black holes and experimental events to go into the amazing chemical night. It's a wonderful event, which is going to happen tonight. And for the Chinese Academy of Science, we have a science literacy high-speed railway, on which we actually demonstrated all the scientific research results about our sky, about the deep grounds, and about all the forest. So we are actually at the square, the science square, where the events is being upheld. Later on, we are going to have interactive sessions with all the events about to start. This is actually a dialogue session, which was quite meaningful. And I believe that all the dear friends, a few days later, will see your own faces on the television. So let's talk about the other events about the zoological museums. Zoological Museum, I'm quite curious. As a scientific research institution, what is your major researching field? So based on we have a researching focus about the wildlife, the reproduction functions, the genotype testings, and also the other different functions of the animals. Every year, we undertake over 500 to 10,000 million researching funds from the nation, and we uptook a few science and research different projects. As mentioned by the curator, the Science Express is about to start. Many kids is about to have an immersive experience about the science. So on the left side of that, this is our national satellite This is a quite familiar sidelines. We have seen it in many different public literacy events. The Mozi quantum satellites, which marks a great leap forward about our quantum telecommunication advances. We also have the two-way satellites and also the dark matter satellites with all the models here. And we believe the scientific express will bring you a more immersive experience about the scientific advances we achieve. So in these scientific squares, for every single event, they are so crowded with the latest research. So here is a very important booth about the stem cell and regenerative science. This is actually an embryo development for the mouse cells. Could you please introduce us what are you demonstrating here? We are using one mouse to give the kids a demonstration of how life develops. By moving together the sperms and eggs after 90 days development, a mouse can be born. So for many kids, they never see how the life was generated. But using this model, it's more easier for us to demonstrate it to the kids. So you will see that the kids are really interested in how life develops. But for the stem cells and regenerative science, do you have any frontier research? The concept of cell is quite familiar with everybody. The very initial concept was put forward by Robert Cooker. They discovered the existence of the cells. The human body is made up of cells. The stem cells are cells existed in the human bodies, but for the embryo stem cells, it is stem cells existed in the embryos. And when it was entered into the early stage, split and separations after extractions ex vivo, we got these ex vivo stem cells. By using the stem cells as a resources to develop several different tissues to replace the harmed organs in the human body. We have done researches about the Parkinson disease, and we also have done some of the cataracts in the research. And in the clinical research, we also started several different experiments. Through systematic research, we believe the stem cell research could be used in the mastocytosis injury. I believe this is actually the future directions of the medical world. Thank you very much. So with the hard effort of the scientists, in the future, we are going to have a better promises. So today, this is a night belongs to all the publics. So I believe the general public is going to feel the Christmas of science. So on the sides, we can see the projections of the science. And it's very easy for us to bring all the it's very easy for them to bring all the demonstrations of science to the remote regions. So we are about to to give explorations to the biggest zoological museums. And just as the curator Qiao mentioned to us, that this museum is not open to the public. It's only for the scientific research. In the scientific night, in these very special moments, so we need to check about what kind of specimens do we have. So this is the largest zoological museums in Asia, and it's also the longest history museums in China. So for all the species in China, for around over 50 different countries, we have all kinds of resources. And if you want to do a zoological research in the East Asia, we are the place that you should go. Our museum is actually the place where you should go, and we have quite good full demonstrations of the history of science. And if you go upstairs, you will find that we have a show narrates the history of science in zoology. So today is a rare occasion for us to have an eye on the histories of zoological science. So let's view a small video clips to understand about the stem cell development. Let's look at the video. Magical stem cell. In the history of humankind, science advances and develops. The ancient Greek scholars put forward the idea that the human body is made up of 4 different liquids. If you caught a disease, you might be required to throw up all the things you have taken up. In the modern era, we actually developed the antibiotics for us to help with all kinds of the surgeries. Today, the development of the stem cell technologies bring us hopes. The very original sources of the stem cell have 2 different resources as stem cells, which were existed in all kinds of the organs and tissues. For example, if we go to the hospital and donate our blood, the stem cell actually existed in our blood, and even if we donate even if we donate the blood, it's not going to trigger the insufficient and inaccurate blood. Another categories of the stem cell is the embryo stem cells. It's going to develop the embryo stem cells. Stem cells can be developed into 2 million different categories of cells. The embryo stem cells can be used in the diabetes and also the tissue engineering reconstructions of the organs. If we actually transfer the stem cells into the skin cells, we can actually transplant the skin cells to those patients who suffered from burns. This is what we call a regenerative medicine. The stem cell has a huge potential, and we believe that we are going to use the stem cells to reconstruct the livers, the heart, and to save the lives of many different patients.
一枚不知疲惫的精子，经过长途跋涉，终于和一枚卵子相遇。咚！一个新生命就这样子诞生了。在哺乳动物中，这种通过精卵结合来繁育后代的生殖方式。
In the mammals, the combination between the sperm and egg is actually the very secrets behind the life science. So, in the laboratories of the Zoological Research Institute, Chinese Academy of Science, we actually use the sperm and eggs to change the very natures of the sperm and cells. In the recent years, the stem cell technologies has achieved quite remarkable results. These stem cells, which were extracted from the mammals, sperms and eggs, they can be reproduced seamlessly, and they can also reproduce. They can actually replace the reproductive cells to finish the reproduction functions. In the recent few years, the scientists are using the gene editing technologies to conduct several different surgeries. First, they breed the stem cells for the mouses into mature stem cells to replace the combinations between the eggs and also the sperms. So the science failed at the first step. According to this research, the combinations between the sperm and eggs is because the sperm and the egg is actually have a feature of certain different genes. With the gene editings, the scientists actually edited two genes named H90 and GT12. They actually edited a new cells. So that is how a brand new search started. So after regeneratives of the egg cells, the mouses actually get a final results, and this is actually the generations, the afterward and offsprings of stamen cells. So for the mammals, the reproduction functions from a single cell is being achieved in the laboratory, while the secrets of life still remains quite huge and vast in the natural world. And the scientists are going to unveil us the very secret behind all the nature. So we are about major events, major parts of this tonight's wonder. So here are some of the collections of different specimens, and we can see the different features.
对，非常的漂亮哈，可以看到各种各样的鹿。然后那这里面有或者说有历史的，然后给我们介绍一下。
这个大家可能都知道呢，这个梅花鹿哈，已经在我们国家已经公司啊。
It's one of the treasures in China. It is also one of the endangered animals in China. That is the reason why we collect several different samples and specimens of the reindeer. So we actually collected the largest head bones for the reindeers. For all the red dotted specimens, these are the reindeers which were kept and naturally died. So for these different museums, we collected all kinds of the specimens, because in China we don't have special museums for all kinds of specimens. So that's the reason why for different institutions and under the Chinese Academy of Science, we collected several different specimens. This is actually a collection after several tens of generations. I'm quite curious, for all the years, what's the difference between our specimens with all the other foreign reindeers? So from the human society, no matter which country they were working at, and I think our category research is quite close to the international research. So that is how we kept all the single specimen research. We don't have a huge difference in different categories. So this is actually a category research based on different categories of animals. That is to say, the global environment is actually one system, and all the different animals are actually echoing with each other in terms of their body features. Here we have the brown bears. We also have the foxes, which were not being shown quite often. These are the specimens only used for the research. I think these are quite. And this is actually the palm fox, and we kept all the external features of all the specimens. This is also for the molecular biological research. So I'm actually enjoy a quite good night at these scientific museums. So for all this part of the museums, for this part of the museum, it was blocked from the general public, right? It's because in the specimen, in the part of the spaceman areas, the more people comes in, the more insects will they bring. So it's not very conducive to the open up of these sessions. So that's the reason why we control the human numbers to enter into this space. So we have several different. We actually use our camera to give you a quite good understanding of all the bones of this elephant. So we turn with the shift of the camera. It's a rare occasion for us to see. These are some of the mammals, their bones and their furs. Majorly, for the majority of them, is the fur of mammals. There's also one fake meat-eating animal, that is the giant panda. Why do we put the skins of the giant pandas among these categories? So, the very natures of the giant panda is that they love to eat the meat, but with the shift of the environment, the giant panda can have to adapt themselves into eating bamboos. But all the developments, all the intestines of the giant panda is actually designed to eat the meat. This is actually a quite for this lion skin. This is actually a national treasure sent to us by an African nation. They actually preserve their head skin. There are so many different skins about tigers. So here, there are so many interesting parts. So why there are several decorations in this kind of skins and furs? I think for these groups of the animal skin is actually coming from the Forbidden Palace Museum, and that was the treasures back in the Qing eras when the royal family was conducting a fox hunting. They actually kept all the skins about the fox, and they put all kinds of accessories of the fox. Can we have a more detailed look about this fox skin? So yes, this kind of animal skin is actually for the daily usage. At least, these furs have over 100 years history. So because for the royal family in the Qing dynasty, they keep a record about the foxes they hunt. So I think it's more easier for us to understand the histories of different species and where all these foxes located during the Qing era. This is the baby giant panda. When it was born, it is not distinct black and white. This is a specimen of a colonial cow. In the zoological institutions under the Chinese Academy of Science, researches like that is actually underway day by day. Today's opening events is also a quite rare occasion for the general public to understand how did they work every day? This is a quite rare occasion for us to see. This is a skeleton of the giant panda. The very natures of these skeletons of the giant panda, I think the most distinct feature is its claws. So for all of these fingers, they are actually because the giant panda need to grab the bamboos, and we can see that the end part of their fingers is changed gradually for them to grab the bamboo more precisely. And we can see for each palms of the giant panda, they have 6 different figures. And if you see one part of the skeletons, you could give the conclusion that this is the skeleton of the giant panda. This is one distinct feature of the giant panda. Let's go to our final lap of today's journey to the museum. After seeing the last specimens of this mammal part of the museum, we see the skeletons of the giant panda. But I believe the exhibition areas for the birds will also astound us. We also have the insects specimen. So we also have different exhibition halls for the fishes and also for the breeding centers and for the reptiles. This is a quite rare occasion for the parents with their kids to have a view about all of these rare animals. Let's look at all the birds exhibition. It is the small birds that we see in our day-to-day life. So why at the very gates of this exhibition area we see the sparrows which was lying in front of the birds? So we all know that back in the history of China, we have 4 different hazards which was harming the harvest in the agricultural production. We have mouses, we also have the sparrows as one hazard. So the scientist who were showing here is Professor Zheng Zuoxing, and he spent his life researching about the living characteristics about the sparrows. He actually published a paper about about sparrows, indicating that all the sparrows are actually eating all kinds of worms in the farmlands. So he actually saves thousands of lives of the sparrows. So this is also a quite good reminder for the generations like ours. We should treat all the animals equally, and we should better understand the very features of the animals. These are several different rare birds. Category 1, protection endangered birds. These are the best animals in the nations. We actually kept all of its zoological figures. So we can see these are quite colorful birds, colorful eagles. So even if after a long time becoming the specimens, these mythological colors of its fur is not being changed. And I think this color is never going to change because this mythological element is embedded in the furs. These are in the birds, the female and the male have different color distributions. The male usually have a more colorful features while the female stays plain. So will the specimen create certain harm to the very existence of the birds? So we actually only collected one for each, and later most of the specimen is being collected for the naturally dead birds. And so we can rest our hearts and to enjoy the appreciations of all the birds. So here all the beautiful colored birds with the red, yellow, green are the songbirds. This is the smallest birds in China. And this is actually the long-tailed sparrows. So they are using their long tail to show off and brag of themselves and pursuing for mating. And for this long tail, it also balances their flight. So although the birds is very colorful, but the colors is actually the original colors of the birds. This is the smallest birds on the earth. It's actually the bee birds. The National Wuhan University and also the Peking University, National Research Centers, and also a French scientist who actually devoted his life collections to China. So that's heading forward to more different spacemen. The beacons are quite important part for the birds. And we actually see about that kind of the angles. So we can see that this is the egret. So for the egret, they are trying to get the insects from the body, from the knees, from the butts of the beach. That's the reason why they have a curved, twisted beacon. So here are different categories of the small birds. With the full demonstrations, they are actually lining up here for the general public. So I can see all kinds of the trees lining up here. There are over 1,000 different animals. And with the collections of all kinds of species, we need to collect it for the recommendations. So for every single different categories, we actually collected all kinds of the birds. So in these bird sections and bird center, this is because birds is closely related to the human existence and human life. Birds bring us birds influenza, and we also have the frontier research about the birds. So this is actually a quite good part of the demonstration. So here, we have several different birds which are frequently seen in Beijing. So Curator Qiao, please give us more introductions about these birds. So here we actually demonstrate different colors of the birds, red ones, yellow ones, green ones, and blue ones, with all kinds of colors. This is also a demonstration of the colors of the birds. And this is also important features for the male birds and female birds. The male ones are usually colorful and beautiful, while the female ones are quite plain in their color. Apart from these two different shapes of the birds, their colors also shifted quite often. It actually differs between two different categories of the birds. So here we also have a distinction between the tail parts of the birds. And we understand that for sparrows, its tail is just like a scissors. We have the round-shaped tail and the two-part tails. This is also closely related to the postures and also the gestures the bird adopted when they are eating. So for example, we have the supportive functions for the woodpecker. So Curator Qiao, you gave us a quite informative 1 hour These are the treasures from the National Zoological Museums. All the animals, and at the science nights, many friends here enjoy the Christmas of science. We hope that these kind of interaction events could be repeat itself in the future. This ends the live stream for the science night. Thank you very much for your watching.